we're faced with inflation for the first time in about 2 decades. What are sort of our common tools for fighting inflation?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at the historical record, literally there's been since the high inflation in the late 70s, early 80s, inflation has been on a downward trend for roughly the past 40 years. And, that's in large part because of actions taken by the Federal Reserve in the early 80s under Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker. He raised interest rates, and that was viewed widely within the economy and by the financial markets as an effort by the Fed to contain inflation. And when interest rates rose at one point, the short-term interest rates were around between 10 and 12%. And that had the effect of reducing both the economic growth rate. It caused a recession. There was what they called a double dip, or back-to-back recessions in the early 80s. And so it was a painful process by which inflation had gotten out of control, and the Fed attempted to rein it in by raising interest rates, which caused a recession. And so if you look over the past 40 years, while inflation has been on a downward trend, every time there was an uptick, inflation would start rising and the Fed would have to tighten the money supply and raise interest rates again. And so you see this sort of cyclical process by which, the Fed tries to steer the economy, between alternating cycles where, interest rates are lower and employment is rising and the economy is doing well. But if it gets a little off track and inflation gets out of hand, the Fed will raise interest rates again. And that, of course, slows the economy. And again, the historical record for the past several decades is that, the Fed has not been able to what they call navigate a soft landing, where, you're trying to raise interest rates and slow inflation without causing a recession. And typically they've not been successful. They've almost always tipped the economy into a recession as a result of rising interest rates. And so it's a very difficult process. I mean, monetary policy is a blunt instrument. And there's some evidence that it's become less effective or less able to have a direct immediate effect. It's often referred to as a long and variable effect, that when the Fed tries to either raise or lower interest rates, the economy responds with a lag, and that makes it difficult to tell whether you've done enough or too little or too much, because what the Fed does in the short term has effects on the economy in the longer term, and weighing that offset and making those trade-offs is very difficult.
So hard to find the sweet spot when it comes to monetary policy, right?